afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are in the world today. Welcome to SolarWinds Management for Mac overview and demo. We're going to talk about all the new and exciting changes that we've made to the Mac agent recently. Now, this is just the legalese to satisfy our legal department that basically says we may talk about stuff that is supposed to happen in the future, but we reserve the right to change our minds. Just so read over that and satisfy the legal team, and then we can move on. My name is Eric Anthony. I'll be the host for today's session. I am the Principal of Customer Experience here at SolarWinds MSP. And typically, the only thing people care about is that I did own my own break fix and MSP companies for a little over 16 years. I've been here at the iterations of Logic Now, SolarWinds MSP for a little over 5 years now, from doing some sales engineering stuff to now doing more customer experience, making sure that you guys understand how to work with SolarWinds and getting you guys content and things that help you to grow your business. Little housekeeping stuff before we get started. All attendees are on mute, and that's not because we don't want to hear from you. It's simply to try and create the best audio experience possible. If you ask us a question, make sure that you use the question window to go ahead and ask any questions that you may have. That way they get queued up and we can go through them as efficiently as possible. And please ask those questions anywhere along the line, and we'll either try and answer them during the webinar or at the end in the dedicated Q&A section. Go ahead and let us know as soon as possible if you have any audio or video issues so that we can try and help you resolve those. And the question that everybody always asks, yes, this session is being recorded, and it'll be available as soon as we do the post editing afterwards. The agenda today is we're going to talk about how to differentiate your MSP with Mac support, how to stand out among the crowd and handle all of those things that your customers may throw at you in terms of Mac support. Then we're going to do a demo. We're going to do some Q&A, and then we'll talk about some product stuff as well. And with that, I'm going to present Brian Best, who is our Apple strategist for SolarWinds MSP. Brian, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Hi, everybody. You can see the title. That's me. I am officially a senior product manager in charge of just about everything Mac-related, Apple-related here at the organization. At SolarWinds MSP, I came by way of acquisition. You might remember we had the Mac MSP thing. That was mine. And like Eric, I'm a veteran of the MSP industry. In fact, I still own my MSP business. We're a little bit weird. I like to call it Bizarro IT, that we're all Mac except for maybe a handful of Windows devices. So that makes us a little bit weird. But much like Eric, we're not just SolarWinds employees, we're also members, partners. So we know a lot about what y'all go through on a regular basis, and I'm still living that world in my 19th year, almost 20th year of business doing that. So very excited to be with y'all and talk with y'all about this today.
Great. All right, so we have to plug the MSP Institute here for just a second. A lot of this material and other material in terms of how you guys can run your business, grow your business, from business topics to technical topics, you can find them in the MSP Institute. Go there to explore all the different topics we have. We have training labs where you can actually take tests on a lot of the topics. And then probably what a lot of people are most interested in is the downloadable resources. So check those out as well. You can access the Institute through success.solarwindsmsp.com, and it's located under the training tab. The other thing that a lot of people always ask me is, how do I know who my account manager is? And it's in there under the account section. So if you log into the Success Center, you can find out who your account manager is there. And before we get started, I just want to mention that if you want to be contacted about any of this content by your account manager or have some technical questions for a sales engineer, please go ahead and type contact in the questions window, and that'll let us know to have somebody reach out to you after the webinar. All right, Brian, on to you.
All right, let's do this. So first, there's really not a lot of denying the fact that the Mac is here, it's not going anywhere, and it's getting bigger. You look at Apple's growth. I have a T-shirt that says, I was a Mac guy when Apple was doomed in the mid '90s. When Apple was this close, you can't see my fingers, but very close to bankruptcy. And then obviously now one of the biggest technology companies in the world, if not the biggest. So it's pretty clear Apple's been successful, and you can chalk that up to a lot of different things, but the Mac is definitely still a very big part of that. And when you look at Mac market share in various ways, there's a couple different ways to look at it. Usually we have it pegged right around the 10% worldwide. In the US, it's around 18%. And in some market segments, like web developers, for example, it's as high as 30%. So, the Mac is definitely not going anywhere. There was a point in time where it was growing and the rest of the industry was shrinking. So the opportunity is there. So let me ask you with a poll question. How many Mac devices do you all have in your client base? None, maybe a handful, less than half, more than half.
Yeah, this was a really interesting question that came up during the original webinar that we did this morning as well. So it'll be interesting to see what the answers are here, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. In the morning session, we had almost nobody who said none, which made me happy. But we'll see what we get here.
Looks like we're going to have some results. And there
Here
we
we
go.
go.
So 4% said none.
Okay.
Then we have more than half is at 11%. That's actually pretty high.
Yeah.
And then less than half at 24%, and then just a handful or a handful or a few is 62%. So that
Right.
is kind of what we saw this morning.
Yeah, very similar. For the more than half crowd, maybe there's some Apple-centric MSPs on here that are like myself, where again I call it bizarro IT, in that you're primarily Mac-based, and that's fantastic. Well, welcome, my brethren. Um, but obviously the ones who have a few, the 62% that have a few, my hope is that this will give you some armament to turn that into the less than half row and move forward. So let's acknowledge the fact that the previous slide was from Wikipedia, right? It's the source of all knowledge on the internet. Not necessarily, but they're not alone in Wikipedia. There sites like TechCrunch and Motley Fool have been talking about Apple's market share rising for ages. My favorite is this one by Ziff Davis, ZDNet. That said, when you look at Apple's success, you think it's iOS, iPad, iPhone. But if you look at the Mac and you spun the Mac off into its own subsidiary, and made it its own company, it would actually be bigger than McDonald's. So the Mac is bigger than the Big Mac. So hopefully you got to be seeing some opportunity, right? I mean, that's massive. That's a massive amount of devices out there for you to take advantage of and for you to manage. So how does it help you? Well, first off, seize the opportunity. If you look at the Mac and you say the numbers are kind of all over the place, but let's settle on like 15% of the market just to make it a nice round figure. All right, then that really ought to represent 15% of your market too. And imagine that being a booster on your bottom line or your top line revenues. So let's say you're 200K a year MSP. Well, 15% would be like adding 30K a year or $2,500 a month. Nobody's going to sneeze at that, right? If you're $1 million a year MSP, and you'd be like adding 150K to your revenues. So it's a huge opportunity for you. Even though 15% might seem kind of tiny, it can represent some really significant numbers for you. So that leads me to the next question. How do you feel about your team's competency? Do you feel like you know a lot about the Mac? Do you feel like you don't know a whole lot? Let's see how this corresponds. I wonder if We Are Experts corresponds to the folks who said they have more than half.
Yeah, and this was another really interesting one this morning as well, because very little people said they know zilch. Um, a lot of people said we know a little, and then the other two kind of filled in the gap there.
Mm-hmm.
And not to throw any spoilers in, but this leads us right into the next section.
Oh yeah, yeah. The We Are Experts dovetail. This dovetailed pretty nicely with the previous poll, didn't it?
Yeah, although I think the not a problem is a little higher at 34% this time. So I think we have a little bit more probably technical, more Apple-centric crowd this afternoon.
That's great. Even if they're not, the secret here is actually the fact that you know it's not that much of a secret, but you already know how to do it, right? A computer is a computer. So regardless whether it's a Mac or a Windows PC, the theory of operation is the same. A lot of the interface is the same. Compatibility is usually a matter of drivers. I'll tell you a story. The trick here is that it's weird, right? So whenever we're troubleshooting in general, we look at weird stuff. Like for example, I was troubleshooting a network not too long ago, or at least my team was. And one of the things we were looking at was their network cables. So they had all these bandwidth problems and slow networking. And their network cables were these thin, flat cables. So they didn't have the twisted pair in them. And I don't know if that's what was really causing the network slowdown, but it was just something really weird that we pointed to and said, that doesn't feel right. And so one of the things you bump into when you're a Windows first MSP and you start to look at Mac is that the Mac is just weird. So you kind of latch on the weirdness, and that can throw you off your game. So here's an example of what I mean. We had a conversation with a PC tech not too long ago. Really super sharp guy, very respected in our industry, but he had a problem. He had a MacBook Pro. He was installing an SSD to replace a bad hard drive, and it was really throwing him off his game. He puts in the SSD and it won't work. And his first question goes to that whole "what's weird, what's different?" And so he got hung up by asking, "Is this drive Mac compatible?" And it's kind of like, well, yeah, it's SATA is SATA, and the Mac has built-in drivers for mass storage. So is the drive compatible? Because he'd take this drive, he'd put it in a Windows PC, and it'd mount. He'd be able to format it, do whatever he wanted to do with it. He puts it in this MacBook Pro, it won't go. But if you step back from the what's weird, what's different, and you go back to basic troubleshooting, the stuff you already know how to do, troubleshooting a computer, you say, okay, well, the hard drive is known good because I just put it in another computer and it works fine. What else could be wrong? And when you do that and you take that Mac question out of the equation, you end up with something like this, and this is what it ended up being for him, was a bad SATA cable. And it turns out he thought it was a bad hard drive. You take that other hard drive and you put it in another Mac and it mounts and was able to get all the data off of it. So that was great. I mean, obviously saved him a lot of time from the aspect of doing a restore or migration or anything like that. The other hard drive was great. But yeah, just ended up being a bad cable. But the weirdness of the Mac kind of took him off his game, and realizing this might be the case. Interesting side note here, this was actually a fairly common malady on certain Mac laptops. But you don't even need to know that because basic hardware troubleshooting gets you there. Just got to get past that weird Mac part. Okay.
Yeah, because
And
I
it's
would
not
think
just,
that the
sorry, go
first
ahead,
thing
Eric.
that I would do is, if I was diagnosing a problem like this, I would take what I thought was the bad hard drive, plug it into another computer, and see if I could see the data, because of course the data is the primary thing I'm worried about, right?
Right, exactly. And even if you put it, like, even if you took the drive and you plugged it into a PC, right? At the very least, okay, it's not going to mount because the drive is Mac formatted, but at the very least, it's going to see the hardware and you'll be able to see that it's there, and it might even ask you to format the thing. And that should be enough to tell you, this drive is probably okay.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. Just ignore the weird part. And it's the same deal with the software too. I mean, the OS is a little bit weird. I mean, buttons that you're used to seeing on the right are now on the left. But all the fundamentals are the same, guys. Files, directories, shortcuts, processes, services, scripts, backup, malware. I mean, it's all the same stuff. You know how to contend with this. So, I mean, yeah, there's nuance, but you can handle that. The best analogy I've ever heard for this, and I really love this, is that it's like right side driving. So if you're an American driving in England or vice versa, I mean, it's the same stuff. You've got the steering wheel, you've got the lines on the road and the oncoming traffic, and you've got the signs that tell you how fast to go or whether to stop or not, and various things like that. But it's all on the other side of the road. So it's just disorienting enough that it makes you maybe go a little bit slower than you would. Like if you're an American driving in America and you're a speed demon, you got a really fast car, yeah, you just go. But maybe in that same exact environment over the pond, maybe you go a little slower because it's a little bit strange. And so that's perfectly natural to feel that way. If you're a Windows first MSP and you're driving a Mac and it's just not something you do all the time, take it a little bit slower, but realize that you already know probably good 90 plus, 95+% of what's going on this system because it's the same stuff. Okay. My other recommendation here would be, realizing this, and if you accept what I've just said about the opportunity and about the fact that you already know how to do it, you know, maybe you don't necessarily feel comfortable putting that out there yet and taking on a client that's all Mac. Well, start small. I mean, the likelihood is that you support clients with oceans of Windows PCs, and somewhere in that building is a tiny little island of Macs. A lot of times it's in a graphics department or a marketing department. Sometimes it's at the C level. You've got a CEO who that's how a lot of the Mac's growth happened to begin with. Is the CEO brought an iPad to work and said, "Hey, make this work with our server," and then you got consumerization of IT. So they're bound to be there. So start small, take down those existing Macs at your existing clients, and there you get the safety net of the fact that your client already trusts you. They already know you. You can be upfront with them about your comfort level on Mac, and they'll be very understanding of that. So it's a great place to kind of get your feet wet and start trying this. So what do you need? Well, you need the same things as all your clients, right? From a tools perspective, you need patching. All right, Macs run Flash, they run Java. It's the same Flash and Java that Windows run. So if you've got a version of Flash that's out there that has a known defect and Adobe brings out an update, should be going around and uninstalling Flash everywhere. Patching Flash everywhere. And you want to patch Flash on the Mac is the same way, because if you don't, then that old version sits there and that same security hole sits there. Okay. To that end, when we talk about cybersecurity, it's the same deal here. I mean, Macs don't get viruses. I know, I was shocked too, right? Apple wants you to believe that. They want you to drink the Kool-Aid because it's great for their marketing, but we deal in reality here. So the reality is, yes, Macs get malware. It used to be very, very infrequent we'd see a new title. That has ramped up considerably. What was once maybe once a year, once every 6 months, is now becoming multiple times a month. We're starting to see some new thing come out for the Mac that is in the wild, that is a threat. Fortunately for us, the threats are not very complex. They're usually pretty easy to detect and get rid of. But they are out there and they are coming with frequency. So I expect that those will get a little more complex as we go. And of course, social engineering is platform independent. So a pop-up in a browser that says, "Hey, please call us for help because your stuff is at risk," that doesn't matter whether you're on a Mac or PC. Same with things like spear phishing or phishing emails. Doesn't matter what email client you have. If you respond to them, your users are going to need cybersecurity training, even if they sit on a Mac platform. Okay. We need backup. All right. You need business class backup, including cloud-based. I know a lot of the Mac OS has Time Machine built into it, so that's a very attractive way to set up a whole disk backup on the Mac. The problem with Time Machine is twofold. One, it's not cloud-based, and making Time Machine cloud-based is so difficult it's really not even worth it. But that means if the building burns down, the Time Machine backup burns down with it. So that doesn't really help you. You need something cloud-based. The other problem with Time Machine is you got to monitor it, right? You can't just set it and then forget it and walk away. If a backup is not monitored, it's not a backup, because it's going to throw errors like this saying, "Hey, there's not enough space," or "I can't reach the backup disk." What do you think your users are going to do with this? Close. I got to get back to work. So you got to be able to monitor this. All right, monitor your backup, whether it be Time Machine or whether it be something else, which we'll talk about later. So what if you just don't wanna? What if you just listened to everything I've just said over the last few minutes here, 20, 30 minutes, and said, "You know what, that's fine, Brian, but no, I don't wanna." All right, well, ignore for the moment the revenue. You're just saying, "No, I don't want 15%, make it go away." The thing I would tell you here, first off, is that remember, this isn't the 90s anymore. The whole Mac versus PC thing it's archaic. Choosing a side is archaic. We don't need to bring this to the level of Star Wars versus Star Trek, right? We don't have to go there. it's just a choice. I just choose to use Mac because I like it better. That's really the only reason, and it's as valid a reason as anything because it's based on an opinion. So, if you like that, great. If you can't stand the Mac, fine. Don't use one as your daily driver, but don't turn away the revenue. And the other part to remember is that you want to differentiate your MSP. There's lots of MSPs out there that when they hear the word Mac, they kind of freak out and they turn it away and say, no, I don't even want to go there. So that's a way to differentiate yourself. And especially now with MSP sort of getting commoditized, whatever it takes, right? So here's something you can do that's fairly easy by comparison to some of the other things that are out there that you can take on. But let's talk about what happens if you don't. So for me, there's three risks, right? There's the risk of data loss. We just talked about not monitoring that time machine backup, for example, right? So, you can condition users to save stuff on the server, but we all know sometimes they're not gonna, especially at the C level, they'll just save something on their desktop, and you got to protect that. Likewise, some settings, browser bookmarks, that sort of thing. So you want to make sure you're protecting those. The big one for me, obviously, is in the middle, the security incidents. We talked about malware on the rise. We talked about cybersecurity training. If you're not patching these Macs that are on your customers' networks, you're leaving back doors open. It's really just that simple, and they'll use the Mac as a vector to get in to the rest of the network and get to it. And then lastly, risk of customer loss. And I got to tell you, this is a real thing. Like I said, I own my Mac Apple-centric MSP. One of my clients is we only support their little marketing department with their handful of Macs, and the rest of them all are Windows PCs, and they have another vendor handling those Windows PCs. Not long ago, I was having a conversation with the CEO of that organization, talking about their Mac and talking about what we're doing. And I happened to mention just casually, not even really thinking about it, that I'm rolling out Office 365 everywhere at all my clients. And his eyes just lit up. He's like, what? And the reason he lit up is because he's like, we still have an on-prem Exchange server that I've been thinking we should get rid of, but my IT guy says, no, we should stick with it. Can you talk to me about what it would take to roll out 365 for this organization? So all of a sudden, I'm a vendor that's only doing their Macs, but I'm being asked to broaden that and go and start taking on the Windows devices and Office 365 on those Windows devices because he's not happy with the performance of his Windows MSP. So risk of customer loss is a real thing here, guys. If you're basically inviting another vendor potentially to come in and say, and maybe they don't have another Mac vendor already, but maybe they're just not happy with the amount of support they're getting from that, and they decide they want to farm that out. It's another reason for you to get good at that, get good at the Mac, so you don't open that up and let them go shopping for somebody who can do both. Okay, so that's definitely a real thing. Let's do another poll. So what's stopping you? What's stopping you from supporting Macs at your clients?
So that been burnt in the past question is really interesting to me because I think there are some people out there who have kind of dipped their toe in the water of Mac, so to speak, and had an issue that they couldn't resolve. And I think it speaks directly to what you talked about before when you talked about it's just different enough to kind of freak people out and not have us follow standard troubleshooting procedures.
Yeah, and that's, yeah, exactly. I think that's definitely a thing. And just for everybody's reference, while we're waiting for the poll results to come in, I'm in the same boat. There was a time not very long ago where I didn't support Windows at all. I just said, no, Windows device, I'm not touching it. No way. Right. And it's kind of the same deal here. So all of these are things that I considered. Instead of I simply don't like Apple, it was like I simply don't like Windows. And a lot of times that was my whole reasoning. But for the exact same reasons I'm telling you all, on the Mac stuff, that you can do it, you already know how, that you got tools for it, that there's risks associated with it. If I've got one of my biggest clients and they've got a handful of Windows PCs, I have to make sure those PCs are patched and up to date and secure. Otherwise, I've got a backdoor in the client's network, same as if you all were ignoring the Mac. So it looks like we got our results in.
Yeah, and like we saw earlier, lack of tools is the largest one, and hopefully we're going to be able to show them how that the tool set that we have available for them is going to help them get over that hurdle. But what I think is really interesting is what we can't actually see in these poll results. I've gotten several responses in the questions window about none of these apply to me because I'm just doing it now.
You're doing it. Well, great. Yeah, you're right. We didn't put an other here, did we? What's stopping you? Nothing's stopping me.
Yep,
No, that's
and
great. I'm glad nothing's stopping you.
we're just about getting to the point where we're actually going to show you guys how the new stuff works in the RMM dashboard. So hold on for just a few more minutes, and we'll be diving into that.
Yeah, not even a few more minutes, just literally like next, because here's our summary. Supporting a Mac, obviously it's a huge opportunity. It's a differentiator. Like I said, you already know how. It's like driving in England, or if you're British, driving in the US. And really the biggest thing is you risk a lot by not doing it. Never mind giving up all that revenue to somebody else, but risking losing clients because of a security incident or because they're just not happy with the fact that they got to get a second vendor for Mac support. So absolutely. All right. With that, you want to jump into demo time?
Absolutely. And while you're getting that set up, I'm just going to go ahead and remind people that if they have more questions about this that we may not get to in the Q&A, or if they're too technical for the Q&A, you can go ahead and type contact into the questions window, and that'll let us know that you want us to have your account manager reach out to you, or a sales engineer reach out to you to help you with that question.
And of course it logged me out here. There we go. Copy. Thank you. All right, here we go. So management for Mac, we really is a culmination of everything we've been putting into the Mac over the last 18 months into the Mac agent of RMM. So why don't we start with the easiest thing? So if I'm assuming most everybody on the call is an RMM customer already, one of the things you're definitely going to want to do is come up to the agent menu to auto update to workstations and make sure your Macs are updating to Agent 320. 320 GA includes all the latest and greatest stuff. So definitely make sure you got that there. We got a lot of stragglers hanging out on version 2. That's not going to show you what we've got here. Okay. Short of that, if you have a number of Macs that you have not added to RMM yet, what you want to do for sure is pull down the agent. Now you can do this guy here. Here's the problem with this guy. It's a two-step deal. So it's going to pull down a package. You're going to install that package, but then nothing's going to show up in the dashboard until you also register it by opening up the agent that you've installed in the Mac and logging in with your RMM credentials, your dashboard credentials. So my preferred way to do it would be the site installation package. This is something we added in version 3. You can come in here and pick, your client, the site, and then in addition to the Windows agents, you'll see the Mac agent here, version 3.2.0. When you click next and you download it, what you end up with is a zip file that looks a lot like this. If this will respond, there you go. And when you double click this zip, it unzips, and what you find in the folder is the same package that you downloaded if you just downloaded the agent by itself, but you also end up with right next to it a little text file, a little settings ini file. And inside of this file is everything the agent needs in order to register, including credentials, but the credentials are hashed. So you don't have to worry about them getting their hands on your name and password. So you can distribute this to your frontline techs. If you're feeling it, you can even send it to a client themselves and ask them to install it without worrying about sharing credentials with them. And then it gets installed, and then the device shows up in one action. The device will be installed and enrolled and start showing up on your dashboard. All right. Once it's here, you'll see you got Mac and Windows in the same place, same dashboards. That's nice. Your summary, once it's in, we'll start adding all the different features. Some things we've done here, obviously you get checks. We've pared down the checks quite a bit. My goal here is they got to be useful. I don't want a whole lot of noise here. If a check is failing, it really should be an actionable event. And if a check is never going to fail, then what's the point of it being there? So we wanted to actually do something. We also want that workflow of a check handing off to a task. So we've added the tasks field here, tab here, excuse me. When you add automated task, you've got all of the tasks that used to be in the separate Mac MSP dashboard are now here in the RMM dashboard where we'd expect them to be. Okay. In addition to the ones we've predefined, you can also obviously come in here to Script Manager and add your own. And when you add your own script, you can define it as a check or a task for Mac and give it a name. Now, a lot of people are kind of like, ew, scripting, I don't want to have to do my own scripting. And I hear you. But you know, the script doesn't have to be anything crazy. So it could literally be like a two-line deal. If you ignore the shebang and you ignore the exit, you know, this is just a simple remove this file and echo a little message that says I got rid of it. And that's it. That's your script. I mean, that's not a huge deal. So if you're troubleshooting a problem, you find a solution online that says, hey, just run this little command, pop it in here and push it out as a task, and there you go. I do this all the time. It works great. So you can add your own check task workflow. I want to call out one task in particular because this is, in my opinion, one of the most fundamental things you need to do, and that is our manage patch task. So if you add a run manage patch, it's not the same UX as patch management here. I'll talk more about that in a little while. But when you add this task, what you're getting here is you're getting a number of updates, 200 specifically, about approximately 200 third-party titles, in addition to all the Apple updates like the OS, Safari, iTunes, security updates, etc., assuming you leave that box checked. And you're asked to pick a level, testing or production. We're going to want to default to production, and here's why. You know, a lot of Windows first MSPs don't have a real sense of what's going on in Mac patches. And I say that with the bizarro experience of saying, you know, what does this KB article, what does this patch in this KB actually fix? I don't know. I'm going to install it because it's a patch. So you generally are going to default to one of two things. You're just going to install everything and approve everything, which could lead you to deploying a bad patch that's going to cause you some problems, or you end up deploying nothing and approving nothing, and that's obviously worse because you're not patching. All right. One of the things we're doing here with production is when a title is getting deployed by run manage patch with the production radio button here, it's only deploying patches that we have manually downloaded, installed, vetted, tested, make sure they work, make sure that there's no huge bugs out there that are causing issues for people. So I'll give you a good example. There's been a couple times in the past year or so where Microsoft put out a new Office update that broke Outlook. So literally you deploy this patch, the user goes to fire up Outlook and Outlook won't even open. And the user's, obviously what's the user going to do at that point? Flood your help desk with, oh my God, I can't get my email. All right, well, if you're running run manage patch with production here, your users are never going to see that because me and my team, we're going to hear about this and we're not going to approve that patch. And what's going to happen is a couple days later, Microsoft's going to bring out a new one that fixes that. We'll put that through testing and we'll approve that. But you'll never see that bad patch go out there. A more recent example, we actually skipped over macOS Mojave 10.14.4 completely. So we had 10.14.3 in production. 10.14.4 came out, it broke a bunch of stuff with Gmail authentication, it broke a bunch of stuff with some VPN, to the point where we heard from some customers, some partners, hey man, this shouldn't go out. So we held it back, waiting, and then sure enough, Apple brings out 10.14.5. That's in testing now, and I'm going to probably promote it to production either today or tomorrow, or maybe Monday, because we don't like to do this over the weekend. But in any case, we're handling this approval process for you. Now, if you just got a customer that just is like, hey, when's this update coming? Like they know when the updates are out and they want the latest and greatest as soon as possible, fine, throw them into testing. I mean, as soon as the product enters our repository, a device set to testing here will start to deploy it even before me and my team have had a chance to vet it and test it. Okay. And again, the results of what gets patched will show up in your reports. So you'll be able to see those in the automated task report, just like the rest of these. Okay. One of the things we also added to tasks here, and this was brought over from Mac MSP, is the ability to determine if a task should run at the login window or not. So in this case, we don't really want to do font caches while the user's logged in. So we're only going to do those when the user's logged out. We have that checked. So the task, when it's time to execute, will queue up, but because there's a user present, it won't run. It'll wait till they log off. And let me kind of show you what this looks like here. So I can run an automated task that does not require a user to be logged out. And within a minute or so, it's going to fire off a notification in the Apple Notification Center. And one of the things we added here is your branding. I think as an MSP, it's supremely important to always convey your value to your customers, because they're not getting the immediate feedback of writing you a check because you've spent 3 hours fixing their computer. You're being proactive. You're doing stuff behind the scenes. And so they need to know that, hey, you're providing value. So if you look at the agent, we brand the agent with your logos here. Now, if you've already done this on the Windows side, the Mac agent will actually inherit the same branding assets you use for Windows. But we've also added a few different file formats to improve the way the branding looks in Retina displays, the high-res displays that Apple puts out, like on their laptops and the 5K iMacs. So we can get those to you. And you see that also applies here in the notifications as well, that are provided by the macOS Notification Center. So again, a pop-up will come up not only to display your value to your partner, but also to let them know that, hey, when something is happening, it's not a Russian hacker. It's their trusted managed services provider that's doing that for them. And on something like Run Manage Patch, where it requires logout, that's going to queue up, and it's just going to wait for us to actually log off the machine. And then you'll see our window there that's showing that the tasks are executing when the user is logged off. That takes just a second. My VM's being a little pokey today. It's not a good demo unless you have a hiccup. There you go. And so it's branded. And again, you notice how it's blocking the login window, so the user can't just inadvertently log in while we're in the middle of installing an OS update. If I let this guy go here, he's going to go ahead and install 10.14.5 and reboot the machine and do the whole deal. If the user just wants to get back to work, fine. We can just stop it, cancel it, and they can get back to work. And we'll see that the task was interrupted at that point. But again, it's your branding, so they are both seeing your value and knowing that they're not getting something malicious happening on the computer. Okay. So in addition to all of this, the more recent stuff that we added to the agent is we've added a backup solution. We've added the backup documents feature here, which is in my opinion a really fantastic add-on, especially if you've gone through and you're running Time Machine all over the place. Like I said in the slide deck, Time Machine is not a business class backup, primarily because it doesn't have a cloud function to it. But this gives you a really inexpensive way to back up common documents. So there's about 50 different types of documents we're backing up. Same as we do on Windows, but interestingly, on the Mac side, we've added support for Apple's iWork stuff, the pages, numbers, pages, numbers, and Keynote documents, and also added support for P-lists. So we're grabbing P-lists from the machine, which will help preserve things like internet bookmarks and settings and that sort of thing that gets backed up as well. Okay, so very inexpensive, twice a day, cloud-based backup, set it and forget it, but don't really forget it because it's monitored right here inside your RMM along with the rest of your checks. Okay, and then lastly, our most recent addition that we brought out to GA last month is managed antivirus. And so managed antivirus is really in my opinion, kind of the pinnacle of what we're trying to do with RMM from a design perspective. What I don't want you to have to do with a Mac is learn something new inside of RMM. You already know how to do antivirus, managed antivirus for Windows. It's the exact same for Mac. In fact, we even went so far as to not create new Mac-only policies. We're leveraging the exact same policies you use in Windows on the Mac. Now, there's just certain settings that the Mac version of the managed antivirus is not capable of doing, and we just note that in here, that hey, this particular piece of the policy doesn't work with Mac devices, but the rest of it will. And so literally, if you have a site that is set to run managed antivirus with a policy, and you add a Mac to that site and upgrade it to Agent 3.2.0, it'll kick on antivirus and it'll get going. And same as Windows, your quarantine shows up here, your scans show up here, your active protection threats show up here and show you when you got something that got caught. I've actually been really, really impressed by the engine that runs this, and how quickly it gets something. I already told you the threat vector on Mac usually isn't complex. It's tricking people into downloading something and installing something. So if your user happened to download a copy of MacKeeper, um, no sooner do they unzip it and manage antivirus goes to work and sees that you've unzipped it, and you see how it just disappeared. I didn't even have time to come in here and double click the stinking installer, and manage antivirus got rid of it and told me, oh, yep, that's gone. We got rid of it. And within a check cycle or two, it's going to show up in here on the dashboard as well. And all of this is going to show up in the managed antivirus reports, same as your Windows antivirus reports, the exact same report. So this is what I mean when I say managing Mac and Windows in the same dashboard without having to learn anything new with the same UX. This is what our goal is for everything we're building for the Mac. And when you put all this stuff that I've just talked about together inside of this same dashboard with your Windows devices, it's a really unique solution on the market that you don't have to learn anything new. And then, of course, we're not done, right? When you right click on a Windows device and you see all the things that can run, kind of a bad example, I got a lot grayed out here, but you see things that it can run, and then you right click on a Mac device and you see things that are grayed out. These have big red target signs for me. I want every single one of these things to light up. But we felt like these were the most important things, the most fundamental things you need in order to be able to go out and give those Macs great support. So, Eric, what do you think?
So great demonstration as always. So if you're ready, we can probably move into some Q&A because some of the stuff I'm probably going to ask about is if you have the demo open, if you keep your RMM dashboard open there,
Sure,
we can probably answer some of those, and I'll go through those types of questions first.
let's do it.
So the first question is, how do if I'm already using the Mac agent, how do I update it across all of my devices that may have an older agent on them?
Yeah, great question. Right here under Agent Auto Update Settings, you go under Workstations, and you'll see Update All Mac Workstations, and you can say go to the latest agent. Real simple. When they start checking in, assuming they're a compatible OS version, the Mac agent 3.2.0 requires 10.8 or higher. There are certain features like AV requires 10.11 or higher. So even if you update to Agent 3.2.0 on a Mavericks 10.9 computer, it'll update to Agent 3.2.0, but it's not going to activate the managed antivirus. It's just not going to be compatible. In actuality, I can tell you the next release of this, we are probably going to drop support for 10.8 and 10.9 entirely, and we're going to require 10.10 and higher because most of the features that people care about are going to start requiring newer version than even that. But at the very least, you'll still have checks and tasks, including manage patch.
Great, and that actually answers another question that a lot of people have had is what are the oldest versions that the agent supports at this point?
Yep. Yeah, there you go. Like I said, 10.8, 10.9, but I'd start making moves to get those upgraded to some level. At this point, that's a really old operating system, and we don't see a ton of them in our fleet at this point. So that's why we felt like it's good to shed off the old code, which just helps our development process, helps our testing, helps us get stuff out faster. That and the features that most people care about, like managed AV, backup recovery, even take control. Screen sharing, you're probably going to need a newer OS than what the basic agent can do. But even if you got a machine that's still stuck on 10.8 for whatever reason, you still get checks, tasks, and managed patch is one of the tasks that will continue to run.
All right, great. Next question. So if I want to write my own scripts to add as either checks or tasks, what scripting languages can I write them in?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you can write them in pretty much anything that you can run on the Mac. So usually I'm doing things in Bash and Shell, but you could do Perl, PHP, Python. Yeah, I haven't tested this, but I think AppleScript works if you do it. But in any case, that more than likely any script you're going to want to push out to the Mac is going to fall into one of those, and we can handle it. There was some talk about PowerShell. PowerShell, obviously you can install PowerShell on the Mac. We don't do that, so you'd have to have the PowerShell engine installed. But theoretically, you could push a PowerShell script to the Mac as well.
Okay, great, because that was one of the kind of side questions as well.
Oh, great. Yeah, it can. I know it does right now. It does do some stuff with line breaks that we're trying to kind of clean up and prevent that from being an issue for people. So if you try to push it and it doesn't work, try looking at your line endings and make them Mac or Unix compatible line endings.
Okay, great. Now this question, I kind of have a personal answer on this, but I'd like to get your take on it as well. In terms of the managed patch,
Mhm.
how often do you recommend that those be run?
Um, I think that's really a decision on the MSP. How often do you want the device to be patched? For me personally, I let it go as often as I can. I'm pretty opportunistic about it because of the fact that a lot of the patches I can't install while a user is logged in. And getting users to log out can be a bit of a pain. There's a little bit of training associated with that to say, hey, look, you got to sleep sometime. How about at the end of the day, you just log off your computer instead of shutting the lid or shutting it off? And when you can kind of get over that hump, then you'll see the updates will go fairly regularly. But some people, it's like they'll do it every day. Some will only do it once a week. Some you got to kind of nag about it. Um, but that'll make sure it gets it in there. So I have mine set to go pretty much every day, knowing that it's going to queue up and it's going to wait for a logout to happen when it goes. So, but that's ultimately a decision you can make if you want to manage the change a little tighter than that. You could obviously schedule those on a monthly or however frequently you decide you need to do it.
Yeah, and my answer is pretty similar. Uh, but I would specifically say that if you're struggling with these types of decisions, the sales engineers can really help you walk through a lot of that type of stuff in terms of you explaining to them what your customers are like, what their tolerance levels are, and then coming up with a solution that really works for you.
And bear in mind that you can add more than one managed patch task. So I could say, hey, this is going to be my weekly one that I'm only going to do on a certain time frame, um, and you'll have multiple of them. So um, right now, you'll notice when I do this, you'll notice that the run only if user logged out is grayed out. That's actually a bug. We're getting rid of that. That's going to get fixed here in the next I don't want to promise a time frame, but I think we've actually already got it fixed. We're just waiting to deploy it, and that'll give you the option. So you might have one that says, run once a day while the user is logged in. Now, bear in mind, Manage Patch will be smart enough to say, hey, I'm not going to try to install an OS update while the user's logged in. So we actually do it by title. We say, like Firefox, for example, can we update Firefox? It's installed. Can we update it? No, the user's running it. Okay, we'll wait till it's quit or until they log out in order to update it. We'll just kind of queue that up and wait for it to go. But if it's there and they're not running it and it's not open, then yeah, we're just going to install it in the background while they're working. It's not a big deal. Again, I test these to make sure. So if there's an install that like eats up a ton of CPU or would be disruptive to your users, I'll see that as part of the testing process and make it so that it only runs when the user's logged out, so as not to interrupt their day.
Yep. All right, so two questions that we had these in the last session as well, and I think they're very important. What about web protection and remote background?
Yeah, fantastic questions. Like I said, I want every grayed out item here to light up. We prioritized backup documents primarily because it was a fairly easy one for us to get out the door, but managed antivirus we prioritized because it's the one our partners told us was the one that they needed the most. So we did that. Remote background, reboot, web pro, and then the more granular patch management that would let you go in and approve all your titles. Those are all things we want to get done. I can't promise you timeframes. You saw the legalese on slide 2. But know that these are things that are definitely on my radar. They're things I want to get done. My goal is for the organization is complete parity with the Windows agent. And so all of these have to light up. So keep an eye on us. We're coming. Watch the status blog. And, I know you've dealt with a lot of lip service around the Mac, maybe from us in the past, maybe from other vendors, but real artists ship. And so I give you these things as proof that we are shipping and we're getting stuff done.
All right, and kind of similar to that last question, we know we have backup documents for the Mac now in RMM. What about professional and BMR?
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit here. So when you look at backup and recovery, and you look at going to a particular site, this is the one we have available for the Mac. If you have professional turned on a site and you upgrade a Mac on that site, the Mac will activate documents. Our thinking is if you want backup that site, you want backup. So let's add the Macs on there as well. Now, professional, there's some technical debt that needs to be addressed there, and the backup team is working on that. And the answer is that the standalone backup product that we offer that's not integrated in RMM is Mac compatible. It works great. And so you could totally do that. But there's certain things in standalone for Windows that we want to bring into RMM as well. And so when that answer gets solved, the Mac answer will get solved as well. However, I want to address bare metal recovery for a second. You don't do bare metal recovery on a Mac, and that's goes to the same reason you don't do monolithic imaging on a Mac anymore. If you look at the most modern Macs that are shipping now, they all have a T2 security chip on them. And the security chip is checking the OS to see if it's been installed in an Apple approved way. And if you do a bare metal restore or a restore from an image, that's not Apple approved and it's not going to pass validation. And that security chip isn't going to allow it to boot. So the way you do quote unquote bare metal recovery on a Mac at this point is you install a clean OS, maybe from the recovery partition, but you install a clean OS and then you do a file folder restore on top of it. Okay, so backup documents actually gets you very, very close to that as it is. But yeah, our standalone backup will get your applications and the rest of the stuff that you would want to get installed, and it won't touch the things that are protected by system integrity protection. And so bare metal recovery on a Mac is probably never going to happen at this point.
Okay. Can we use monitoring templates like you can for Windows PCs
Oh
to?
God, how could I forget? How could I forget monitoring templates? Yes, absolutely you can. So if you set up your Mac perfectly like this, right click on it and say, hey, let's create a monitoring template from this with my checks and my tasks. And there you go. You've got a template you've created from your perfect Mac. You can say, hey, I want this to check in every 5 minutes. Let's run the DSC at 9 a.m. I want all these things in there. Boom. Oh, I already have one. We'll call it 2. And there you go. Now I can right click on a site and I can say apply monitoring template, and there's my template, and replace all the existing stuff. And there you go. Yeah, this was actually a huge thing for us last year to be able to get this done and get it out the door.
Right, because that allows customers to standardize their Mac deployments, right?
Absolutely. Yep. Get your Mac set up exactly the way you want at a particular client. Make a template from it. You can also make the template from scratch. So if you come in your manage templates and you just add a new workstation one, you can come in here, give it a name, and say, hey, I want this to be for Mac. And then you can add your Mac checks. Like, hey, look, there's a time machine status check. Let's add that one because we're running time machine all over the place, and we got to monitor that. And then you can add your different tasks, like your run, manage, patch, for example. And there you go. So you can just create them from scratch, or you can create them from an existing Mac that you have set up exactly the way you want.
Yep, and I know you went through that last part there a little bit fast, but we did have a specific question on where did they find those predefined tasks?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's under settings, monitoring templates, manage templates. And oh, I'm sorry, your predefined tasks are in the, when you add a task either through the monitoring template or here in the tasks tab, you click on, oops, let's do that later. Come on. You go to the tasks tab, you go to add automated tasks, and you'll see them there. I keep hiding this one because that's going away in like about a week or two. It shouldn't be there anymore. But these are our predefined maintenance tasks that we have available here. And then here's the user-defined ones that you would add in the script manager.
All right. Now we only have a couple of minutes left, and I do want to say at this point, if anybody has questions in regards to especially pricing or very specific technical questions, that this demo is just not geared up to answer those types of specific questions. go ahead and type contact into the questions window, and that will make sure that our account managers reach out to you. And if it's a technical question, of course, they can get you either tied into support if it's a support type issue, or with a sales engineer if it's more of a technical how-to question.
Eric, can I address one thing on price? Pricing on this, on everything I've shown you, is the exact same pricing as your Windows agents, and that's done on purpose.
Perfect, because that's a common question, and of course we don't have to get into details on price to answer that. And one of the big reasons we don't talk about pricing on these calls is that we have so many denominations and so many different countries that we deal with. It would just take too long. So
yeah, and I just for me it's part of feature parity, right? I've been talking a lot about Windows and Mac in the same dashboard. And we want the features to be the same, we want the UX to be the same, so we want the price to be the same. We don't want to gouge you just because you're adding an Apple device to here. It's just another operating system. You got Windows 7, you got Windows 8, you got Windows 10, you got Mac OS.
Yep, and then one more question, because this seems to be a common one as well. What happened to the Mac MSP separate dashboard?
We spun down all the separate Mac MSP dashboards when we introduced Agent 3. It actually happened a couple months ago. We sent out some notice. Now there are some folks who had the Mac MSP dashboard who still have it for a variety of reasons, and I'm actually reaching out to all of those partners here in the very near future to talk about that. So if there's questions specific to that, I can get those answered. But for the great majority of our partners, everything that you wanted out of the separate Mac MSP dashboard are now here in the RMM dashboard, alongside everything else the RMM can do, like manage antivirus and backup, and take control, and your Windows devices, and in the same reports as those devices as well.
Great. So let's see, kind of along the lines of that in the Mac MSP old dashboard, is there a way to install or run the new patch management task without the customer or without the end user logging out of the device?
Yeah, like I said, that was a bug that's in the where this is grayed out and we'll let you uncheck it. We've got that fixed. I don't know exactly when it's going to be out, but it's already fixed. I think we're just waiting for it to go out in a release. And then you'll be able to add the task and uncheck that box, and it will run in the background. Now, there will be certain updates that will never run in the background, because if you do, you're just asking for trouble. And so what we will also have for you in the very near future is a new task that shows up here that says log out the user. So you could trigger that.
Great. All right, so let's see, we've got 1 or 2 more minutes. So I'm just, because there are a couple of questions about the AV. And I know we discussed it earlier, but can you just explain what engine we're using, and some of those basic things about the new AV engine and feature for customers to know more about that?
Sure, just like on Windows, we're running the BitDefender Agent. So we do, that's the engine that we're running. It's a fairly new release for them, but it's, like I said, I was very impressed with how well it runs. You can see the thing that I threw at it earlier in the demo has already showed up here on the dashboard, and said that it got rid of it. But again, we wanted to go that direction because it's something you're already used to on the Windows side, and it enabled us to keep those same policy settings. And as there's certain features that are not Mac compatible, like we noted here, but as that engine matures and improves, we'll be able to enable those things and make this dialogue go away in certain scenarios. Okay. I'm not sure if that answers the question, Eric. Do you feel like that answers it?
I think that's probably pretty close to what people were generally asking about. And that brings us to 1 minute before the end of the hour. So if you could do me a favor and go ahead and pull up that that last slide for me, the ready for more.
Sure.
Perfect. So of course, there's a couple things you can do. You can go ahead, and if you haven't used the new agent, go ahead and download that. If you need a bit more detail or help, like I said before, to go ahead and type contact into the question panel, and we'll make sure your account manager gets in touch. Now, there have been a couple of questions, not really questions, but statements in regards to I've already reached out to some of those people like support, and I just need a little bit extra help. If the sales engineers can't help you, or if you ever find yourself not being able to seemingly get to the right people, go ahead and reach out to me. Customer experience is what I do. I'm here to make sure that you guys have a good experience, and part of that is making sure you get connected with the right people. So feel free to go ahead and reach out to me at any time. I'm frequently out on social media. I go to some live events as well. So go ahead, find me, and let me know what you need. So thanks a lot, guys, for joining us. We'll see you on the next one.